So we're going to talk about reproductive system. This is going to be our last quote-unquote lab for this year. We're going to start with the anatomy of the male reproductive system first. So first thing is to identify scrotum and testes. So this whole structure is scrotum, and inside of the scrotum are testes. Next we have epididymis and vas deferens. So this structure right here is epididymis, and vas deferens will be this long and convoluted tube that eventually delivers the sperm into the ejaculatory duct. Ejaculatory duct is essentially this part which delivers, so that's ejaculatory duct, delivers semen into the urethra. Now we have several glands, so seminal vesicle. You can see seminal vesicle right about here. Prostate gland is pretty obvious, this one. I'm going to remove all this. So again, seminal vesicle, prostate gland, and lastly bulbourethral gland, which is not super obvious. It is about right over here. Well, penis, obviously here or here, and glans penis is this particular part. Now for a female reproductive system, we're going to start with ovary and oviduct. So that's going to be ovary, and that's going to be an oviduct. Uterus and uterine cervix. Here you can see uterus, and the cervix is this specific place where vagina opens into the uterus. And vagina, it's clitoris, so here's vagina, here's clitoris. Glans clitoris is essentially that, and clitoris is homologous to male penis. Here you can see glans clitoris as well. Labium majus and labium minus. It's easier to remove the. So this skin folds that are outer are labium majus, and the skin fold that is inner is labium minus. So let's talk about some of the review questions. So which female reproductive organ is labeled A since it's homologous to penis? This is going to be clitoris. Location of the urethra in relation to the vagina. So urethra, anterior or posterior to vagina. Considering the fact that vagina is right here and urethra is here, urethra is anterior. How would you describe the location of the uterus in relation to the urinary bladder? That seems to be relatively simple. This, here's uterus. This is urinary bladder. So urinary bladder is located inferior, uterus is superior to urinary bladder. Women tend to urinate more frequently during pregnancy because uterus, where fetus is, presses on the urinary bladder and makes them urinate. Let's actually, again, uterus, oviducts. We don't have to label oviducts, right? Okay, it's okay. Those are ovaries, if you're curious. Urinary bladder and the prostate gland on the images below. So you've got a pretty massive urinary bladder right here. So urinary bladder, prostate gland. You can see prostate gland right about here. Location of the prostate gland in relation to the urinary bladder. So prostate gland is if you look at this here, prostate gland is quite obviously inferior to the urinary bladder. Prostatitis, inflammation of prostate, leads to swelling of the prostate, and swollen prostate blocks urethra that I just pointed at with an arrow. That explains why it's difficult to urinate in prostatitis. So two ways male and female urethra are different from one another. So female urethra is much shorter. That's one. And number two, female urethra and female reproductive organ, vagina, they are two separate organs, while in males, urethra serves both for urination and for reproductive function, ejaculation. Testis and epididymis. So the whole thing, that's testes. And epididymis is this particular part. Well, okay, let's make it more strict. So, well, that's kind of specifically testes, and that's epididymis. Function of the epididymis is that's where sperm matures, and then ducts that carry sperm away from epididymis are called vas deferens or ductus deferens. They're going to be somewhere in this part of the picture. We're not going to talk about oogenesis at all. We're going to talk a little bit about the histology of the testes. And spermatogenesis occurs within the seminiferous tubule. So seminiferous tubule is this. So this is seminiferous tubule. And the lumen is right here, the open space. Spermatogonia are diploid cells that essentially generate sperm. So spermatogonia are these cells located at the periphery of the seminiferous tubule. Normally there are 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs in each spermatogonium. Now spermatids are immature cells. We need to label the spermatid on this image here. So spermatids will be cells in the lumen, immature cells in the lumen. Immature spermatids are haploid cells, which means it's not 23 pairs, it's just 23 chromosomes. So instead of 46 chromosomes, which are normally found in spermatogonia, there are 23 chromosomes in the spermatid. Now, one primary spermatocyte produces 4 sperm cells. Now this arithmetic exercise, you can do it if you want. Okay, you can multiply 10 by 365 by 100 million, and then whatever. I'm not gonna ask any number questions. That's ridiculous. Urethra on the photomicrograph below. So here you can see urethra on the micrograph. Urethra in males plays which role in reproduction? It participates in ejaculation. Corpus cavernosa and corpus spongiosum. So corpus cavernosa, we have two. That's corpus cavernosa and that's corpus cavernosa, and that is the bottom, corpus spongiosum. During sexual arousal, blood flow into these structures, corpora cavernosa and corpus spongiosum, increases. That leads to swelling and erection of the penis. Now, primordial follicle. Primordial follicle is the smallest, so that would be something like that. Small oocyte surrounded by one layer of squamous epithelial cells. In puberty, Primordial follicles develop into primary, secondary, and mature follicles. Multiple layers of epithelium around follicle. This is now secondary. So secondary follicle is this with the oocyte in the center. And Graafian follicle will be this, the fluid-filled cavity, and oocyte. Now, that is not human ovulation. How does an ovulated egg get transferred into the oviduct? Now, you have to appreciate it's not an egg that is ovulated. It's the secondary oocyte, but that's me being pedantic. So, fallopian tubes have at the ends, I don't know if we can see that here. No, not an anatomy part, but basically secondary oocyte is transferred into the oviduct by synchronous beating of cilia at the end of the fallopian tube. Now we're not gonna talk about math again. You can do this math if you want. 335 multiplied by 365 divided by 28, whatever the number is going to be. It's going to be actually slightly more than 365, something about 400. Now, what is detected in urine by ovulation tests? It is luteinizing hormone, because spike in luteinizing hormone stimulates the ovulation. Histology of the fallopian tube. So that's a lumen of fallopian tube, ciliated epithelial cells, and here you can see many individual ciliated epithelial cells. Here you see cilia. The role that cilia play in the fallopian tubes is to propel the secondary oocyte towards the uterus. Of course, smooth muscle is found within the fallopian tubes, and secondary oocyte inside of a fallopian tube is pushed forward towards uterus when peristalsis occurs. Unfortunately, we didn't do the sperm motility part. We're not going to talk about STDs, as I mentioned. We're going to jump onto the review questions. So let's label the organs A and D on the diagram. So what is A? The whole A is scrotum, B testis, C epididymis, and D vas deferens. Sperm is produced inside of the testes, while secondary oocytes are produced inside the ovaries. These gonads considered homologous to one another because they originally are essentially the same during the fetal development when the sex is determined. They all start as ovaries, and then as sex is determined, if the fetus becomes a male, then these ovaries are transformed into testes. But essentially they perform the same function. So number of chromosomes normally found in sperm cells or secondary oocyte, that is grossly incompetent. Here secondary oocyte at the completion of spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Number of chromosomes is 23, while in somatic cells there are 46, double the number. In the female reproductive system, clitoris is homologous to the penis, and actually clitoris has no apparent physiological function. Organs A and D, so A is uterus, B here is ovary, C is the fallopian tube, and D is vagina. The major differences that exist between spermatogenesis and oogenesis. Spermatogenesis occurs much faster and in much larger numbers. One spermatogonium produces 4 sperm cells, while oogonium produces only 1 secondary oocyte. And finally, the hormonal regulation is different. Spermatogenesis is regulated by testosterone, oogenesis is regulated by estrogen. Graphene follicle right here. Oocyte within the follicle is right here. STDs, didn't talk. Flagellum of a sperm cell is this. That's a flagellum. The function is movement. 3 ways to prevent STDs. None, really. I mean, didn't talk about it, but yeah, you know, condoms, permanent partner, and stuff like that. Okay, so that'll be it for reproductive. Remember, on Tuesday you're gonna have quiz on both reproductive and renal.